Well, it looks like 2024 is going to be the year of AI even more than 2023 was, and that brings with it a number of moral and ethical dilemmas, and I believe that none of the big tech companies are properly prepared for it. So consider this video a plea to OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, xAI, and even Tesla to include those who specialize in the humanities in your 2024 employment plans. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This video is inspired by a video that Dave Shapiro did a couple of weeks ago. I will leave a link to it, of course, in the description. If you don't follow him, he's one of the most intelligent, deep-thinking people about the AI area that is on YouTube currently. I highly recommend subscribing to him and watching all of his videos. They're fantastic. Anyway, from the 36-minute linked video, I'm going to pull out just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and riff off of his comments and explain why I think that the humanities actually might be more important today than they ever have been.
The next thing that I'm not looking forward to is overzealous safety, particularly in big tech. So I don't make it a secret that I am not a fan of Anthropic. I was a fan of Anthropic because they split away from OpenAI and they focused on constitutional AI. But what they did was they made the most sanctimonious chatbot I have ever seen. And it's actually just kind of like an ongoing joke about like the things that will send Claude into like an existential crisis and the odd things that it will refuse to do. But it's also very inconsistent. That is like these companies, these big tech companies are not collaborating on it. They're kind of doing everything behind closed doors. They're making decisions about quote unquote ethics. And as far as I know, most of them don't actually even hire ethicists. Like, does Claude actually have any philosophers on staff, any ethicists on staff, any sociologists on staff? I don't think they do. And I know that I'm pretty sure that OpenAI doesn't. I was talking to some friends in OpenAI, like they hire product managers from Meta, right? They hire former Facebook people. Those are not people that have a really strong grasp of ethics and morality, or humans, or psychology. And so because of this, it's like you end up with these engineering type of solutions to very human problems, and they don't really know what they're doing. Now, obviously, like if you've got a good product owner and you're trying to just build a tech product, that's one thing. But when you're trying to force feed ethics to these AI machines and you don't really understand ethics in the first place, you end up with these really sanctimonious, really kind of contrived schemes around quote unquote safety. Look at the example that for a long time, ChatGPT wouldn't talk to you about mental health, but it was more than happy to help you make a biosafety level lab level 4 setups where you could do gain of function research and synthetic biology research. So it would help with those, but it wouldn't talk to you if you were sad. Like that is the kind of like idiotic overzealous safety that comes up from these basically we can do it and nobody else can, this hubris that exists in some of these companies. So I'm not really looking forward to that. It seems like some of them are starting to talk they're working on creating comprehensive policies and regulatory practices that say these are the 8 things that you need to test. But for as much emphasis as they've put on safety, like, oh, we're going to spend 6 months testing this, and that none of that crossed their mind. Like, what were they doing for those 6 months testing behind closed doors? Did they consult anyone? And they said that they did, but they clearly didn't consult the right people. And so that level of hubris and overzealous safety is something that I'm really not looking forward to, which is another reason that I'm a big fan of open source. So again, this is a rant. Sorry. Not sorry.
So there you have the rant from Dave, and he has a very good point in my mind, and that is that you've got people in Silicon Valley and generally in big tech in general that have this sort of messiah complex where they feel like they really do know best and they know more than everybody else. But what you have is a group of people in general, and this is just statistical, obviously there's a very diverse group of people that work for these companies, but in general, these people are very, very focused on engineering, on discovery, discovering really cool technology and figuring out how to move that into products that people can use. And that's super cool. I have nothing against that. I have a small startup company myself where we're trying to do that very thing ourselves. So it's that sort of push towards making really cool new products. But you go back to that Jurassic Park line where it's like they spent so much time wondering if they could do it, and they didn't stop to think about whether they should do it or not. I think that was Jeff Goldblum's character that said that. Anyway, I might be misremembering that, but anyway, that is a pretty good line here. It's one of those things. It's like they're creating this stuff and they're not really stopping to think about the moral, ethical, social consequences of what they're doing to a high enough degree. And then what you've got is a bunch of these engineers who are then tasked with coming up with solving these moral and ethical problems. And these are things that people who specialize in the area, people with PhDs in philosophy, and even going back to classic philosophers like Kant and back to Socrates and Plato, etc., like hundreds and hundreds of these people over thousands of years of history who have spent a great deal of time thinking deeply about this stuff. The problem is that you've got engineers who've spent very little time thinking about this in their education or in their free time or whatever you want to call it. Those people are being tasked with coming up with ethical standards and ethical tests for these products very, very quickly, and they're just ill-equipped to do so. And just as an interesting aside, I'll bring a prop out here today. This is Trial by Trolley. One of my kids actually bought this recently, and we played it a couple of days ago during our Christmas holiday fun get-together kind of time. And it's an interesting thing. I was like, this is the most bizarre thing. You're taking this ethical dilemma, the trolley problem. It's that classic ethical dilemma that you've got a trolley and there's a split in the track, and in one direction there's one person and in the other direction there are five, and currently the trolley is heading towards the five people, but you have your hand on a switch and you can pull it so that it redirects itself and it will kill the one person instead. So that's the basic setup of the trolley problem, and there are many different schools of thought about what you're supposed to do, whether you're supposed to take a non-interventionist stance and go like, I'm not going to touch anything, fate is fate, it's going to kill the five people, and if I pull it, then I am morally responsible for killing the one person. The other one, of course, is the law of statistics one, which is like, it's better to kill one person than five people, so we should do that. Same thing about, if you could go back in time and kill Adolf Hitler when he was a youth to, solve World War II problems, things like that. So, there's all of these ethical problems that people spend a lot of time thinking about. The problem is when you're doing this for these large language model companies, it's not a game that you're just playing. This is something that has real world consequences in terms of the way that people are going to be interacting with your product and the way that they're going to be using it. And of course, the way that things look is that these LLMs are going to become more and more and more important to society and to the way people work and to the way that people communicate with each other and interact with each other on a daily basis. So this is super important stuff, right? This actually has massive, massive consequences for society, for commercial enterprise, but even more so potentially, this could be something, if it's handled correctly or better, could reduce tensions between nation states and things like that. So it could have massively positive consequences, and if it's done poorly, it could have massively negative consequences. So of course, the question is, why wouldn't these companies be hiring on people who have specialties in these areas? If they're paying these AI engineers $500,000, $1 million a year with $1 million signing bonus, which I believe is about the going rate for these high-end people, why not spend $500,000 hiring on a couple of very, very sophisticated ethicists and philosophers to actually work on this as well? Those are the people who've spent their careers working on this, so they would be the people, if anyone, who would be best able to handle this stuff. So I would highly recommend that these companies consider hiring on philosophers, specifically with specialties in ethics, to really, really think about this stuff and help guide your company. Don't have this idea that these engineers who are not trained in this area are going to be adequate to handle these problems that no one has been able to handle in thousands of years, but turn it over to people who are professionals in this area and allow them to help guide the company in this way. Furthermore, and you might consider me a little bit selfish in this area because this is my area of interest, passion, expertise, I believe that these companies need to hire people with specialties in various humanities subjects, things like history, things like literature, things like social psychology, even things like music, fine art, etc. You need to hire people who have specialties in these areas, or at least have them consulting with you. Even if you don't hire them on full time, you should have them consulting with you, because you need to have a broader understanding of the world. And the problem again with engineers, and again, that's statistical, there are plenty of engineers who have a great deal of background in other areas, but the statistical probability is that most of these engineers and people running the companies are people who have been very, very focused all their lives on working on engineering, on AI, on software, that kind of a thing. And that's great. That means that they're fantastic at that job. What they are not great at is having a really solid sense of the broader history, the social context, the psychological context, the fine art, the creative context in which they're operating. And that means that all of these LLMs and also diffusion models that are creating images and stuff are going to be hamstrung, because they're not going to be able to generate things with as broad of an understanding of the universe as people with humanities specialties will be able to infuse into the products. And if you don't know, my PhD is actually in English literature, specifically Samuel Beckett and dramatic literature. I also have a degree in physics, an undergraduate degree, a Master of Arts in English literature, and also a Master of Science in artificial intelligence. So this is why one might claim that I'm being selfish here, because this is something that I am very passionate about. I am passionate about broad-based understanding of the world, and the sciences are just part of that, and AI is just part of that. And, you know, all of that science and engineering, in my mind, is not being directed in the best possible way if you don't include the humanities and don't have a humanistic sense of the broader perspective and the broader historical context in which you are creating these products. It's very important. It's not so important if you're just creating a widget that your company sells out and whatever, you know, it's just something that people buy, no big deal. But these are society-changing technologies that we're talking about right now. Clearly, society has changed in the past year. Just remember, it was like November of 2022 when ChatGPT came out, and that has been just barely over a year, 13 months at this point. And between that and products like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney and DALL-E, etc., the world has changed pretty radically from just 13 months ago. But the issue is, I feel like a lot of these companies are just really big ships that don't really have a good pilot. They have a pilot who understands the engineering of the engines and how to get the propellers to turn and everything, but they don't really understand a good direction to point these giant ships. And that's where people with these other specialties like philosophy and the humanities and the fine arts can really come in and help your companies. So if anyone from any of these companies happens to be watching, I would love to talk to you further about this. As for the consequences of doing this, I think the consequences could be fairly significant. You know, you look at something like OpenAI. This morning I was trying to get it to do something kind of silly. Somebody made a mistake. They were writing and they said drunk and a frunk, and I thought, oh, that's a fantastic Dr. Seuss, you know, rhyme, etc. And I posted this on X a little while ago, but I wanted ChatGPT and DALL-E 3 to create a Dr. Seuss-like image for this. It simply wouldn't do it. I couldn't mention the word drunk because it had alcohol in it, even though it's very fanciful and silly. I couldn't reproduce something that looked like Dr. Seuss. It just created all of these stupid restrictions when clearly this was just something that was being done for fun, and it should have allowed that. And that's just one example. Dave Shapiro in his video talks about several other examples of the kind of silliness of these ethical standards that are being applied in bizarre ways, and how in particular Anthropic and Claude are very, very moralizing and preachy. And oftentimes you feel like when you look at these products, you're getting lectured and schooled instead of actually having a playmate to talk to and to have fun with. And I know that Elon Musk and XAI have really pushed things the other direction with Grok to try to allow it to be more open and everything. But I also think that that company would be very, very well suited to have humanities specialists and philosophy specialists be at least on their board or consulting or something like that to help them guide the product as it goes forward, because these things are really, really powerful. You need people who think deeply about this stuff and who think about these issues on a daily basis and have a sense of history and have a sense of the broader human context in which these products are being released to try to make them better. These people are going to cost very little money next to AI engineers. Let me just tell you that. Like, you could hire on philosophers and stuff, and if you pay them $100 $150,000 a year to be on there full time, they're going to be very, very happy, because that is a lot more money than they probably make at a university right now. And if you want to hire them on as consultants, they'll probably also be very happy because it's extra money and they can keep their day job. So what I'm saying is that these people cost relatively little money compared to the outlay of cash of building the hardware and compared to the outlay of cash of hiring on these very, very expensive engineers. The cost benefit ratio here is really, really high for hiring these people on. So I highly suggest you all take a deep look at this and how you can best hire on people with these specific specialties. And again, if people want to ask me, I'm happy to chat about that because I would love to talk more about this. I have a lot of thoughts. And by the way, to wrap Tesla into this in the end, so that this at least has something to do with Tesla, I believe that particularly with Optimus, that Tesla themselves needs to do this. And I think a lot of people might be like, nah, this doesn't really apply to Tesla because they're building robots and full self-driving, not really language machines, not really things that are interacting with humans the way that they are. But ultimately, if we're going to talk about the trolley problem, the one thing that in real life might have to deal with the trolley problem is full self-driving. That is a situation where you get into it and the car has to make a decision very, very rapidly between, do I kill, injure one person, or do I kill, injure 5 people, or take the potential to do that, because you're in an either or situation at that point. And that means that far from being a fun game to play with other people or a thought experiment, this could be real life for full self-driving. It's the kind of thing that can happen and probably actually will happen in some sort of circumstance, with billions and billions of miles being driven on full self-driving, every year, and that number increasing. These weird edge cases can happen. And of course, when we turn to Optimus, a humanoid robot, it becomes even more important. Clearly, we will have some sort of large language model interface with Optimus to be able to communicate with it as a human being. And it's got to deal with these moral and ethical dilemmas just like everything else, but it's also got to deal with the fact that it has an LLM on the front, and somebody could attempt to hack the robot to do something bad, right? I mean, again, hypothetically, I don't want to say anyone would ever do this, but hypothetically, someone could try to convince the robot to go and beat up another person or something, right? To smack it around the head, to stab it, to do terrible things. With an LLM, if you hack it and it says something bad, it's like, well, okay, haha, it's just language. It's not going to actually hurt anything. And you showed how it worked. With a physically embodied robot with a large language model at the front end, this becomes something that could potentially become a physically dangerous object and could do very, very bad things. So in my mind, Tesla, far from being the least interested in this stuff, should be the most interested in this stuff, because between the car and Optimus, they are physically embodied artificial intelligence, potentially agents, right? And I talk about this all the time. Artificially intelligent agents are things that actually have agency, that have to make decisions on their own, have their own willpower and their own motivation. And even if these bots don't rise to that level, which they certainly don't at this point, they are working very, very quickly towards artificial general intelligence, where they are able to do many, many tasks very well. And at that point, even if they're just sophisticated tools, they have to take account of moral and ethical dilemmas, and also, again, the sort of human, social, historical context in which they live. And it's really, really important that they actually deal with this. So Dave said at the end of that clip that it was a rant that he was working on. Sorry, not sorry. I'm considering this more of a plea than a rant. I'm saying please to these companies and to small startups, spend some time talking to people who specialize in the humanities and consider hiring them on if your budget allows. I really believe that this is going to be very, very important for you. And the companies that do this are going to have a better guide, a better North Star about where they're headed, and will hopefully bring humanity to a better place rather than a potentially worse place. So as for my plea, just as Dave said, sorry, not sorry. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it, because that's how YouTube's algorithm works. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget, we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a Powerwall, a solar roof, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.